morning, good afternoon, good evening. Many people in Zimbabwe would tell you that we want a better Zimbabwe. They accept that Zimbabwe is a failed state. But how do we move from the present failed state to a healthy and functioning democratic system of government? That is the biggest challenge. And tonight, I would like to concentrate on the opposition. I'd like to explain once again to many people out there who have again and again remarked that no, you should not be concentrating on the opposition, you should concentrate on Zanu PF. And remind them once again that the nation did come up with the right decision in the late 1990s. It had taken nearly 20 years post-independence for many people to accept that Robert Mugabe and these Zanu PF cronies were not the heroes they had thought them to be. They had risked their lives in spearheading the liberation struggle. That is a historic record. No one can deny that. But what the people had failed to understand is that it's not everyone who is in the trenches fighting for a clearly defined cause, in our case, to end white colonial oppression and exploitation. That was a clearly defined cause. Everybody subscribed to that. But what we fail to understand is that it's not everyone who is in the trench who believes in the fight for the cause. There are those who genuinely believe in it and are fighting to promote those values and principles of freedom, liberty, etc., etc. But there are others who are in the trenches who are fighting for a reward, mercenaries, who are willing to disregard all those values and principles in pursuit of their reward. That many people did not want to accept that. This is why it took 20 years for people to finally accept that Robert Mugabe and his cronies were corrupt, incompetent, murderous thugs who were rigging elections to stay in power for their own selfish gain. That was why it took so long. But when the people finally came to that conclusion, the question then was, how are we going to move from this de facto one-party state, Zanu PF de facto one-party state, back to a healthy and functioning democratic system of government? And the answer to that was, well, let's elect opposition leaders whose number one task would be to implement the democratic reforms and end the Zanu PF dictatorship. And MDC, Morgan Tsvangirai, when he formed his MDC party, he was riding on the crest of that wave. That must be understood. They even called their party the Movement for Democratic Change. And people believed they would bring about the democratic changes that we wanted. Now, 25 years down the line, we find ourselves in a situation where not even one token democratic reform was implemented. And that's the reason why Zanu PF continues to rig elections. And not only that, ever since the GNU, the MDC, Triple C leaders have participated in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. This is the problem that we've got to face. So the topic of tonight's discussion is how much longer will it take the people of Zimbabwe to open their eyes finally to see that the MDC, Triple C opposition leaders are no longer fighting in the people's corner. They are now part and parcel of Zanu PF. This is why we cannot, or we have failed to end the Zanu PF dictatorship this last 25 years. Ben, welcome to the program.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. I must say, after the GNU, I think that should have been a point or a starting point for us to realize that the MDC had failed, because basically Zanu PF continued doing what Zanu PF does. But unfortunately, that did not happen. We kind of, I don't know, blinked ourselves, brushed it off, or whatever reason. It just did not come to the realization that, hold on, these guys are actually doing nothing, and yet they had the best opportunity. Fast forward a decade later, 2023, we still were in that delusional state of mind that MDC, now then called Triple C, was the best foot forward. And they came with their usual propaganda, slogans, talks, encouragement, whatever, and managed to lure people to believe that this time was going to be the time. But when you look back at previous elections, you would find nothing had changed. There were no reforms implemented, even though the observers had constantly reminded us that there is a need to change the way we conduct our elections. The people of Zimbabwe did not realize that, or chose to ignore, and I prefer the latter. Fast forward again, we are in 2026, but I must say I've been looking at 2025 and how the social media arena was faring. And I've come to the realization that finally you could see there is a turn of the wheel. The realization that there is a need for a new opposition is finally showing its head. And that for me is hope that at least we have a few people talking out there. And what we must realize is we will always have the diehards, those that will not think for themselves except what they have been told, and they are willing to defend it vigorously. We have to realize that they will always be in our midst. And some people are beyond saving. the more we continue to try and save them, they might take us under with. So looking at 2025 for me and what the social media is saying, there is hope. There is that realization that is creeping up. It's slow in coming, but I mean, if you were to ask the people out there, what would you rather have? Slow in coming than never. Slow in coming is better. So it took us long. It's still taking us too long because we have the diehards. And I think we'll have to get to a point where we have to realize again that we cannot save some diehard Chamisa Chete brigade fans. We have to realize it and move without them. Just the same way you were talking about the trenches. Some guys can be in the trenches and be causing more harm than good. So we need to look out for those. And sometimes we have to leave there. We have to leave there.
Well, my question to you would be, at the present moment, in your view, are those who are still the diehards, Chamisa Chete Brigade, in the majority? Are they going to participate in 2028 elections and give those elections legitimacy? Because that is what matters. You know, if the diehards participate in their big numbers and they give Zanu PF legitimacy, then it really doesn't matter how many we were able to persuade to realize that Chamisa is corrupt, incompetent, a liar, and conman. This is why that question was asked we asked that question at the end. How long will it take for people to finally open their eyes? Because if they are not going to open their eyes before 2028, then we are in serious trouble. And that is the issue. We cannot afford to have 2028 Zanu PF rig the elections, MDC or Chamisa and company participate in numbers and give those elections legitimacy. That is the argument.
So I will try to be realistic here. The near 2 million that voted for Chamisa in 2023, I believe that number has shrunk. And it has shrunk significantly. The challenge, however, lies with our people themselves. Those that have realized and have moved out of the Chamisa Chete position are eager to follow something. Any replacement will do. This is the problem. So you are finding that in the past 2025, whoever came with a message of hope was worth following. No matter how ridiculous and obvious the intentions are, people were willing to follow. So we basically have one problem getting solved, but creating another. The diehards and some, the diehards are obviously going to be left there. Those that have moved out are willing to follow anything. And I've been seeing, I follow social media. There are so many oppositions that are coming up, groups, in invites and so forth. And for me, the worrying thing is we are not realizing that not only had the opposition sold out, but what was their original position, or what did they sell out on? Because once we realize that, we're all just going to go back to say the main problem is our elections. And the opposition was supposed to take care of the problem of rigged elections and nothing more. The whole government idea came in the future, but the original plan was to create a platform where we could finally have free, fair, and credible elections. So, again, to answer the question, I would say the people that voted for Chamisa in 2023, the near 2 million, that has moved. And I think he knows it, and everybody else that is listening knows that that number has dwindled significantly. But the problem that we have again is, what do we do next? Because remember, we are moving ourselves from what we had said was the best foot forward. So now we have no foot or leg to stand on. And with the masses, this kind of creates, panic, fast foolish decisions, and so forth. So anybody that can step in we've seen it with the Geza movement. No matter how obvious Geza's intentions were, people were ready to say, let us follow him. So our problem is we don't know what the opposition had failed to do and what their initial task was.
Well, I think there is a lot of mileage to be have from those who have argued that, it's all very well saying that Chamisa and company have failed, but what is the alternative? That begs the question, however, because if you think that Chamisa and company have not only failed to implement the democratic reforms, if you understand that, and also understand that they have also been participating and urging people to participate in flawed elections to perpetuate the system, then you have got to realize that this is not the alternative. To keep on saying, well, what else can we do, is not the alternative. You cannot say perpetuating the system, which if you participate, you're not going to change anything. And if you participate, you give legitimacy to the system and perpetuate it. Surely, it doesn't make any sense to participate. And I think that point has got to be made. The main reason why people have continued to participate is that most people do not understand in the first place that MDC-CCC have failed. That is at the heart of it. They want to, when it's convenient, when they are cornered, they would want to say, oh, no, we didn't abandon Chamisa because there's no other alternative. But the truth of the matter is, you did not abandon the opposition. People participated in the 2023 elections, for instance, because they genuinely believed Chamisa when he told them that he had implemented the democratic, he had plugged the vote rigging loopholes, and the party was going to win big. They believed him. And people should not start using another explanation. That was what Chamisa told you, and you believed him, and you went and participated. So the problem is you still believe in that. So yes, there is maybe a small percentage who believe, oh, what else can we do? That group, I would say to them, you cannot say, what else can you do? If you genuinely believe doing what you're doing is the wrong thing, you cannot do that. If somebody told you if you cross the river, there are crocodiles in there, and say, oh, well, I have to cross. Why do you have to cross a dangerous river when you know you'll not gain anything from crossing it, and the crocodile will probably have you? You are perpetuating the system that is there by participating. Why would you still want to stubbornly continue to participate? So I really don't buy that argument. And I think this is where our main problem lies. We still have a situation here where a significant number of people out there still believe that Chamisa is the solution. There have been talks on this platform of thinking outside the box. And I think that is an interesting concept. The ability to think outside the box is important. In this particular case, the ability to think that the alternatives that we are being offered, i.e. Zanu PF or a triple C, are both unacceptable. That is thinking outside the box. We have got to learn to realize this is getting us nowhere. We have voted for, we've participated in these flawed elections for the last 45 years since independence, and since we had MDC Triple C for the last 25 years, and nothing has changed. It's because the two alternatives that we are being offered are false alternatives. This is like a mouse being told you can either choose between a cobra or a black mamba. That is not a choice to the mouse, because either snake will kill it. Why would a mouse choose death? The more natural thing would be for the mouse to choose life. And if the alternatives on offer are not offering life, then that is a false choice. And the same applies to our political situation. People have got to wake up to the reality that the present political system will never produce anything other than a false choice. At the present moment, we have MDC, Triple C leaders who have proven, particularly since the GNU, that there is an PF Team B in all but name. Playing for Team A to win and for playing for Team A to have legitimacy. And then come the elections, we think we have got a choice. You don't have a choice. A choice between Zanu PF Team A and Zanu PF Team B, which is just playing to give Team A legitimacy. How can you call that a choice? And the same applies to some of the arguments that some people have been saying about Geza and Chwenga. That is not a choice. It's a false choice. Just as much as in 2017, people were presented a false choice, either Mugabe or Mnangagwa. That is a false choice. You know Mnangagwa was a tyrant. We all knew that he was Mugabe's number one thug. And we didn't expect him to be anything other than a murderous thug. And he has turned out to be exactly that. The choice there was to re-end the dictatorship and replace it with a democracy. And some people thought it was the choice between dictator 1, Mugabe, or dictator 2, Mnangagwa. And they felt, well, one was better than the other one. And it has turned out to be, there's no difference at all. I think this is at the heart of the debate. The failure to recognize that the system has failed, the failure to accept that it has got to be rejected. And the issue of what are the alternatives you have, you cannot have alternatives in the present system because it's like fishing in a sewage pond. The only fish you can catch there are poor quality fish, not suitable for human consumption. But if you say, well, what other alternative do I have? You don't have to fish and eat that fish. You can go and fish somewhere else. To keep on insisting in fishing in a sewage pond, it's your problem.
You know, I would want to look at it this way. The realization that the current opposition has failed is there now. And I believe it's there because I see on social media, I see what the people are saying out there, and the message is loud and clear. But what maybe people may fail to realize is what have they failed on exactly? Because remember now, for the first, let's say, few years of MDC, it was a fight against, or it was a fight for reforms. Then for the majority of the MDC, including the Triple C now and the MDCTs and so forth, was a fight to win a place in government. And I think there is our problem, because a lot of people believe they have failed to remove Zanu PF. And by removing Zanu PF, what they have concentrated on is participation in rigged elections. We have to try and make that clear. So the people need to know exactly what the failures were. And you are right to say the very name MDC, Movement for Democratic Change, was their mission. they were meant to be the ones to implement the reforms necessary, or to fight for the reforms necessary for the people of Zimbabwe to have free, fair, and credible elections. And somewhere along the line, that changed because popularity, greed, and so forth got into their heads. And I think that is important for us to say. Now that we know where the failure is and what the mission was in the first place, I think now this is when it is important for us to get back on that horse and try and ride or tame it. I think that is where we need to get. Because like I said, the realization that opposition has failed is there. Because look, we have over 100 political parties and rising. And the amount of opposition groups on social media is turning ridiculous. So ridiculous that you find some folk are in most of them. So the question is, what are you looking for as an individual? Are you looking for somebody that will participate in rigged elections, or, like I said, that will get back on the original horse, on the horse that was meant, for reforms in the first place? Because we have to realize, without reforms, we're basically useless. Zanu PF will rig those elections and get away with it. And talking about Zanu PF has realized that there is a lot of confusion in the opposition camp. As many as we are giving different messages and signals to the people. And they have created their own, the Vision 2030. That for me is, another throwing of the spanner into the works. Now you find we already lost track of the original plan, which was the reforms. We are now into fighting for elections. Because right now, as we speak, we are fighting for the 2028 election by trying to stop the 2030 and the 2030 that is not there. So it's now messy, I must say. The realization, and I believe the realization that, hold on a minute, this current crop of MDC Triple C failures is not going to take us to where we want. We need a new opposition. I think that became a fear factor to Zanu PF. That became a fear factor to the MDC itself. So what do? They confuse us by giving us decoys and so forth. So I must say, Robert, it's going to be very difficult, especially when our people are not grounded, are not firm, and really do not understand what the failure was. Because a better part of the majority of MDC existence was not about fighting for reforms. Let's be honest. They were more of seats and whatever councils and whatever they could get their hands on. That is the honest truth. So our people think that MDC was supposed to win rigged elections, and that is impossible, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I'd like to conclude my presentation this evening by reminding people, those in the so-called Chamisa Chete brigade, that you have got to accept that Chamisa is a mere mortal. And I've found it really amazing that there are some people out there who have stubbornly refused to accept that Chamisa lied to them when he told them he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That he conned them to participate in the elections, knowing fully well that Zanu PF was rigging, and that participating would give Zanu PF legitimacy. We should not be talking about things like that. Those are facts. They are there. The evidence is there on the ground. To reject it on the basis that our Chamisa is a demigod, he cannot do no wrong, is an outrage. In this day and age, we have to accept that leaders are mortals. They're fallible. If they make the mistake, we have got to accept they made the mistake. If they lied, they lied. If they conned the nation, they conned the nation. Those are facts and realities we have got to accept. It is childish, to say the least, to refuse to accept it. I'll play the video of Chamisa making the promise that he was going to win 2023 elections. And I would like the people out there to ask themselves, was Chamisa lying or not?
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifo iri. Plan ya Mwari haifo iri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
I'm ashamed of Zimbabweans who will go out there and say, oh, I love my country. I'm ashamed of my government. And yet, they are the ones who are giving legitimacy to the same corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical government by consistently participating in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating they are giving Zanu PF legitimacy, all because they cannot accept that Chamisa is a mere mortal. We have paid a heavy price as a nation. 45 years of rigged elections is not a joke. The nation is up to its eyeballs in this economic and political mess. We can stop it. We just need to open our eyes and accept that the present political system is not working. That the men and women we elected risked everything to elect as opposition have failed us. for the last 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU. Accept that, and we can start looking for more competent leaders. This idea that, no, we have got a choice between Zanu PF and Triple C is a false choice. We have to accept that Triple C have failed us just as much as Zanu PF betrayed us soon after independence. That is the fact. That is the reality. And we as a nation need to start accepting facts and realities for us to move on. Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks?
The original mission for the MDC was to implement the democratic reforms necessary to stop Zanu PF from continuously rigging the elections. That even their name suggests. So we cannot deny that. They lost their way somewhere along the line. And for the better part of their existence, they were chasing gravy train seats that Zanu PF was letting go. That is a fact. And I'm glad, like I said, I am seeing a realization that is coming from the people that MDC Triple C is not who they are. And they are not what they are. The people are seeing a need for another alternative. But like I said, the first mission was not finished. And that mission is still very important for the next step. And again, that mission is the implementation of the democratic reforms necessary to stop Zanu PF and whoever their sidekick is from rigging the election. Without that, we can participate all we want. We all know in the back of our minds, Zanu PF will rig those elections. And the very next day, we will be crying, what a waste of time. So I say, to those that can get back onto the horse, and look, I did not say everybody is going to get back onto that horse. But I'm saying, for those that can get back onto that horse, to go back and implement the reforms necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging that election, should get back onto that horse. Some people will not be saved. Some people won't be saved. That is just the rule of life. So it's either we do it without them, so be it. And I think Zimbabwe now needs men and women of principle. Men and women that realize where we went wrong, admit we went wrong, and go back and fix it. That is all that is to it. It's not embarrassing, to have made a mistake. What is embarrassing is not learning from the mistake. So I urge each and every one of us, those that can, those that are willing, let us get back onto that horse and go and fix our past mistake. And then we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. And thank you very much, Administrator. To those out there who would want to join us tomorrow and have their say, please use the link at the bottom of your screen, and you are most welcome to join us. It will be the same time, 6 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. We use the same link every Saturday and Sunday, and is open for discussion. Thank you again to the two, the administrator and Ben there. And to everybody, thank you for joining us. Have a good night.